helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elim Counseling Services.
Hi, this is Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services, a Christian counseling ministry in Ottawa, Ontario. And I want to thank you for listening to this edition of the Life Transformation Radio Show. We're a Christian counseling radio show where chains are broken and lives are transformed. You can find out more about Elim at elimcounselingministry.com. That's E-L-I-M as in man, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. Or you can call us at 613-699-1677. We would like to hear from you, whether it's a comment about the show, a question, or a request for help. Give us a call. We would like to hear from you. You can also tweet to us on our Twitter page or make a post on our Facebook page. Or if you really like the show, you can like our Facebook page so that we can know how you feel about the show. You can access either the Twitter page and the Facebook page by going to our website at elimcounselingministry.com. And today, as we said last week, we'll be dealing with the topic of burnout. And Melissa and I are sort of wondering what's the title to give to this show. And Melissa suggested that we call it The Burden of Burnout. I think I kind of like that title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of came out. I had, for this topic, a colleague at work described someone she knew in her life. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, she's burning out and she's so burdened. And hearing her describe the story of this woman and what she was going through really struck me, because in thinking about it, I think many listeners, and myself included, can think of people we've had in our lives, whether it's friends or family or colleagues who've unfortunately reached the stage of burnout.
Right.
But I don't think there's a great understanding of what burnout is.
Absolutely.
It's sort of, they're on stress leave.
Yes.
And that's sort of the beginning and the end of our knowledge. So I think for us today, we really want to give the listeners the opportunity to hear what burnout is, some stages that you see sometimes when people are going through burnout, and then at the end, sort of describe what we can do if we either find ourselves in these situations, right, or we have someone we love or care about going through this.
And I think I want to talk about some of the symptoms of burnout, so that it might be people who are going through stressful situation and is beginning to wonder, am I entering some sort of burnout here? And they're concerned about, whether or not they're going to cross that line where it becomes chronic, and they are worried. So I'll be covering some of the symptoms of burnout that you can look for as well. And I think I like the word burden that you chose for this show, the burden of burnout, because burnout is a burden not just for the person who is going through it, but for family members who have to walk with that person while they're going through burnout. And it's a burden for employers, some of whom may not be aware or know how to deal with that situation. And I think for burnout too, it is often misunderstood because the person doesn't exhibit a physical wound or a broken arm that you can say, yes, this person definitely needs time away from work. So sometimes there can be a suspicion, is this person really faking it? Are they being lazy? Or are they really going through something where they're actually burnt out and need to have this time away from work?
So off the top, if you could describe what is burnout globally before we get into a bit more of the details about it, I think it'd be really helpful, because as we said, there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is. Some people, I think it's just an excuse to get some time off work and some free vacation, but it's really bigger than that. So could you give a brief description about what burnout is?
One definition by Gurdon, Everly, and Dusick in 1996 says, burnout is a stage of mental and physical exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. So I think that's a very good definition of burnout, where a person is facing a work situation where they have been going through stress for a long time, and then it gets to a stage where they're mentally and physically they can no longer cope with the stress of the work environment, and so they have to be away from that environment in order to recover.
So again, as our listeners always know with us, we always love to go back to the Bible to look for examples. And you've described Elijah as a biblical example of someone who's experienced burnout. Can you describe a little bit about Elijah's story?
Well, I'd just like to read the verse in 1 Kings 19, verse 3 and 4, where it says, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the desert. He came to a broom tree, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the tree and fell asleep. And I think that those few verses from 1 Kings chapter 19, I think depicts what I would call a work burnout situation, because we can see that Elijah was in an occupation that, if we may call it that, it's a spiritual occupation, but nonetheless it was what he did day in, day out. And it was a very toxic work environment. For one thing, he was constantly exposed to danger. He had to be running for his life, hiding. Another thing that was probably very stressful in that kind of a situation is that he was often in isolation. He was often alone. He had to be hiding. Where he was had to be a secret, because the king of the land was after him to kill him. Then I think there was also this sense of futility where Elijah is concerned, because he's working, but to what end? And we'll notice from the narrative in 1 Kings 19 that Elijah went on to say, I have worked so hard and zealously for the Lord. And basically, I'm not quoting here, but in essence, he's saying, to what end? Mm-hmm. What have I achieved in all of this hard work? So oftentimes in burnout, we see some of those same sort of situation where there is isolation, there is futility, there is this hostile work environment. And yes, your life might not be in danger, but you might feel as if you are not worth anything whenever you're in that environment. Those kind of toxic environment are very environments that will eventually lead to burnout.
So you began to allude to the toxic environment a little bit in Elijah's story, mm-hmm. as a cause of burnout. Are there other causes of burnout that sort of predispose someone to having these type of issues?
Absolutely. So some of the other causes of burnout, so we talk about the environment, but then there are other factors, other work-related factors as well that could lead to burnout. If someone is working long hours, example, long, sometimes shift workers, where they don't have a system of sleep, a steady system of sleep, where their sleep patterns are ever changing. Sometimes those kind of situations can be very conducive to burnout. Even for people with 8-to-5 jobs, we're seeing more and more people today in 8-to-5 jobs who are having burnout because their work never ends. Mm-hmm. They're actually working 8 to 5, then they're working on their laptops at home, they're working at projects at 10 o'clock in the night, they're finishing up something for the next morning. I think when you get into that situation where you have your mind is constantly on the go, and there is no rest from the task of work, I think that can be a factor that can lead to burnout. And I think there is some what I would call atmosphere of the work environment, where if you have conflicts with others in the work environment. Like maybe there is a supervisor that you can't get along. You're feeling picked on day in, day out. You're feeling as if you can never measure up to a task. You're feeling as if you're always failing at something, or you're being spoken to in ways that are disrespectful. Those things can lead to a burnout as well. And where people are unclear as to what is it they're trying to achieve, why they're trying to achieve it, or not having a sense of purpose for what they're doing. This will sometimes, these are situations that can sometimes lead to work burnout. Before you go on to your next question, Melissa, I want to welcome our listeners who are just joining us. If you have just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show. I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services. And with me in studio is Melissa Waggott, and we are discussing the burden of burnout. And if you're not familiar with Elim, you can find out more about us on the web at elimcounselingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. And you can also call us by phone at 613-699-1677. You might have been listening, and you might have realized that you might be going through a situation that is making you feel as if you're heading for a burnout. We suggest that you do something about that you get the help that is needed. And if you'd like to call us to talk more about that, you can call us at 613-699-1677. Go ahead, Marcy. You had a question.
My question was, and I think I just wanted to clarify with you before you go too much further, is in this discussion so far we've referenced work. And just to be clear, because there's different types of work people do, and it's not just necessarily in an office type building work. Would this also fall into place, I think of like stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home parents, that their work is within the home?
Absolutely.
Could these type of situations also apply there?
Yes, I think the short answer is yes, but let me just expand on that. I think for stay-at-home moms, for example, even though they're not working per se, that they're in an environment where they're getting a salary, they are still working. And if they're constantly on the go, where they're constantly doing a list of endless things, and they're working from morning until night, and they do not self-care, meaning that they do not take time away to relax and to just have a distraction from the work that they're doing, people in those situations can suffer burnout as well. So it doesn't have to be a paid situation. It can also be a volunteer situation where sometimes people become so zealous about what they're volunteered for that they burn themselves out in pursuit of some higher goal, or because of their great belief in what they're engaged in.
And I think sometimes we see that in the church, that overzealousness where people just want to get involved and want to say yes, and they become that weary and well-doing, and they just overextend themselves to the point of burning out.
The church, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go first.
Yeah, I was about to say that the church can be an environment in which burnout is very, very prevalent, because people sometimes feel guilty if they say no to doing something. And we know the old adage that 20% of the people do 80% of the work, or something to that effect. So what we have usually are a few keen people who never say no, and they're always saying, yes, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. And especially in expanding churches where there is more and more roles being added on, and you have the same 20% of the people doing more and more, we can have a situation where burnout becomes possible. So if we look at the situation of Elijah wasn't in a paid job per se, but he was very zealous for the Lord in what he was doing. And Elijah worked himself to a point where eventually he got to the stage where he just lay down and said, take my life, I want to die. Now I know that some of you scholars listening to me out there will say, you're taken the Bible out of context because he was threatened. It wasn't just the overwork that made him say that he wanted to die. I would say, yes, you're correct. He was threatened. But if you read the rest of the narrative, going back to chapter 15 of Elijah, you would see that Elijah was always threatened. The threat that Jezebel made in chapter 19 was nothing new. He was running for his life all the time. But I think when that constant threat met with emotional and physical fatigue, he actually dipped to a point where he could not deal with that stress anymore. And so it is that he got to that point in chapter 19 where we prayed to God and say, God, take my life. I'm not better than my forefathers. And we went on to say that what I am doing is not achieving anything. They have killed all of your prophets, and I am the only one left. So that sense of futility, even though it's not a paid job where he's working, in a structured situation necessarily, I think even in spiritual causes, people can suffer from burnout.
So now that we know what situations tend to predispose someone to burnout, are there typical stages people go through when experiencing burnout? The sense I get is it's not just a one-time you wake up and you're burnt out thing. It seems to be a bit of an insidious process that develops over time.
Absolutely. And I don't have time in this show to go into all the different symptoms of the stages, but I'll just mention a few of them. And if you'd like to get the full list of all the stages, you can call us at 613-699-1677, or you can get our email information on our website at elimcounselingministry.com. So to answer your stages, Melissa, there are 3 stages of burnout. The first is what we call the stress arousal stage, where stress is begin to be aroused by the work environment. And there's a whole list of about 10 things that we can't go into, but I'll just mention a few. And if a person has any 2 of those symptoms, then they're already in that stage. And some of the symptoms would be forgetfulness. If a person is beginning to forget things that they would usually remember, someone who's very good at remembering things suddenly starts showing forgetfulness in the work environment, it might be a sign that you're entering into the first stage. The other is headaches. If you're having headaches and you find that you're beginning to have headaches day in, day out, begin to take heed that your body might be saying to you you're entering into the first stage. Insomnia, the inability to sleep restfully at night, is also a part of the first stage. Anxiety, persistent anxiety, this constant sense of being in a stage of anxiety can be a sign that you're entering to the first stage. And as I said, I don't have time to get into all the stages, but I think it's information that is worthwhile to have. So if you want to call us, I can walk you through some of the other points. Then the second stage is what we call the energy conservation stage, which includes any 2 of the following such symptoms, such as a person who is usually on time for work begins to turn up late for work. This is a sign that your body is beginning to shut down, and your body is beginning to say to you, you shouldn't be there, or you're beginning to subconsciously think, I don't want to be there, or consciously think, I don't want to be there. So the turning up late could be a sign that the person is entering into burnout. Resentfulness. This feeling of resentfulness in being around co-workers, or feeling bitter towards others in the workplace, where you just don't want to be there, you don't want to see those people anymore. And every time that you see someone's face, there is this resentment and bitterness that comes in. That can be sign that you're entering into the second stage. Or sometimes the energy conservation stage can also have this sense of apathy, where this person begins to be apathetic about the work. Someone who is usually very caring about detail gets to a point where they just becomes very careless in what they do. They're not zealous for perfection anymore. They're not zealous to having things done well anymore. This could be a sign that a person has entered the second stage. And then the third stage is the exhaustion stage. And there's a whole list of things again, and I won't go into all of them, but some of the things on the list, and if you have any two of these, it is a sign that you have now entered into the final stage, is chronic sadness or depression. If you begin to feel, get to this stage, then you're in the exhaustion stage. There's also the feeling of just wanting to drop out of society, wanting to get away from it all. And when we look at the story of Elijah, we can see that Elijah was at this stage. He just wanted to drop out of society. When he said to God, God, take my life. I am no better than my forefathers. What he's actually saying is, I want to check out God. This work that I am in, this task that I am doing has become, I'm exhausted. I can't continue anymore. So we have this image of Elijah lying under a tree and falling asleep. That's a classic stage of someone who has entered burnout. Sometimes people get to that stage where they're so fatigued, physical fatigue, that they will sleep in. They can't turn up for work because they have now entered the chronic stage. And this is usually when people will see their doctor, and the doctor will say, you're having a burnout. You need several weeks or months of work. So if you have just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show. I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services, and with me in studio today is Melissa Wagot, and we're discussing the burden of burnout. And I've just went through some of the stages of burnout that that can help you identify whether or not you're entering or into a particular stage. As I said before, this is a very common and very serious issue. So if you would like to find out more about this topic or get some more information on the topic, please call me at 613-699-1677.
So one question I have for you is, we talked a little bit about the stages and some of the things people may see. Are there other symptoms people should be on the lookout for in themselves or their loved ones that may be a bit of a red flag that things aren't going to get better unless something is acted upon?
I think too, for people looking on, if you have a husband or a wife or a child for that matter who is working, and this person is usually a very easy person to get along with and very optimistic and enthused about his or her work, and suddenly this person gets to a point, or not suddenly but over a period of time, this person gets to a stage where they're now showing a lot of negativity about their workplace, and there is nothing positive that they have to say anymore. This could be a sign that they're beginning to enter some of the stage. Another symptom, another emotional symptom, is what we call what is irritability, where a person becomes irritable. And it's like you're walking on an eggshell around this person. This could be a sign that someone who is usually, this is out of the character of that person, someone who's not usually like that. It could be a stage that this person is now entering into a stage of burnout. And we also have physical symptoms that we can look for in ourselves as workers. So if you're beginning to feel a lot of aches and pains that you don't usually feel, and there's no other explanation for them, such as back aches. I mentioned headaches before. These can be signs that you're entering into burnout. Muscle stiffness, weight loss, unexplained weight loss, inability to digest your food properly. It could be a sign that you're beginning to experience physical symptoms of burnout. And we also have the mental aspects of burnout as well, where there is a person that might have been feeling confused. You're doing a task, and then all of a sudden you don't know whether or what's the next step, a task that you would do day in and day out. All of a sudden, you're in this moment where your mind just seems to have a fog. And you can't tell, okay, what am I supposed to do here? This, I should know this. This is something I do several times a day, every day. There might be something that is happening in your mind that is beginning to indicate that you're entering burnout. And then I think I talked earlier about making mistakes. I don't know if I did, but if not, if a person that is usually highly functioning suddenly start making mistakes on the job, keen employers who understand burnout will begin to pay attention and say, there is something about this that isn't quite right. John is not usually this kind of worker. Let me have a talk with John to see what's going on. A very good friend of mine, I had a discussion with once, and he told me that he was working, he was into technology, computers, and he's a very highly skilled person where he's one of the sought after person in the industry. And he said that in one of his jobs, it got to the point where he was just beginning to make mistakes, and he didn't even realize that he was making these mistakes. And his boss called him aside and said, this is not like you. There's something going on here. And the boss forced him to go on a few weeks off. And he said it was the best thing that could ever happen to him, because when he went away, he realized that he was already in a stage of burnout, and he didn't realize it. But by taking those weeks off, when he went back, he was a lot more productive and back to his normal self of being highly productive. So as usual, we have run out of time so quickly, Melissa, and we haven't scratched the surface of some of the things that we'd like to talk about today. So we'll definitely have a part 2 to this show next week, when we'll be going through and looking at some of the things that can be done if you realize that you're in one of the stages that we have talked about. And please call us at 613-699-1677 if you'd like to get more information ahead of the next show. Again, I want to thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Life Transformation Radio Show. And thank you very much for being with us on the show again, Melissa.
You're very welcome, Michael.
Stay tuned next week for part 2. Until next time, this is Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Ministry, your host on the Life Transformation Radio Show. Thanking you very much for listening, and praying with all my heart that God would grant you happiness in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart. God bless you.